Okay.
Okay.
Where?
Huh? What?
How do you
I
want
did.
it to pay?
Oh,
Ready to go.
So this is gonna be a marathon distance at sprint speed. So the entire legislative session with what we can expect in the next few months. In 30 minutes. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Renee.
Okay, awesome. Well, as it was discussed earlier, some of these bills are still being signed, right? So we are starting to go through the bills as they're finalized, as they're signed. And gathering the ones of interest for the department and working with starting to work through the bills. So I just wanted to highlight, like Thomas said, highlight these ones today that as a state board, you would be of interest to. So there's the charter school bill. We've talked about that one before, right? House File 813. So I just wanted kind of a refresher, I guess, what we talked about this one before. This bill creates two potential models for establishing a charter school. There's the school board, state board model that is created, and also the founding group state board model. So just wanted to have that awareness for you of the state board impact with those two models. Also, within that bill requires the state board to adopt a performance framework that clearly sets the academic and operational performance indicators. So for these charter schools. And this is also a bill that we'll be digesting more as a department. And we'll have more information coming out at a later date. This is a high level overview. Also, there was the education approach bill. It does create, there's a task force that's created in that bill for diverse pre-K through 12 teacher base in Iowa to look at that for developing a framework that expands opportunities for a more diverse teacher workforce in the state of Iowa. And part of that information, I wanted to point out that it requires the task force to submit a report of its findings and recommendations, including any legislative or administrative changes, not only to the governor and the General Assembly, but also to you, to the state board. And that report is due by December 15th of this year. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that.
Which, is there a number to it associated? to it?
Yes, House File 868.
Thank you.
Good question. And that's again, the education of corporations bill.
So what's the conversation around that specific part? What's the conversation? Are we looking at different points for?
Past board members.
for,
if they want to sign up.
approach?
No, this is just a task force. It's like a policy piece that was stuck into this corporation bill. So it's just a task force looking at developing a framework, expanding opportunities for more diverse teachers
Okay.
within the state of Iowa.
So who is the governor appointed this task?
It lists within the bill, it lists the minimum membership members are listed actually in that bill. It includes
Kimberly's
representatives,
name,
excuse me?
Kimberly?
Mhm.
No, I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean,
I didn't see that.
our
It does-
equity, committee
Yeah.
chairperson seems like
Wow.
following up this morning. I don't know.
It does include representatives from school
You can
districts.
kick me if you want.
Thank you.
It does include representatives from school districts and current teachers and so forth.
Okay,
It's all listed within that bill.
all
so,
right.
Thanks for bringing that up. I didn't realize that was.
Yeah, House File 868.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Also within the education appropriations bill, there is a Division 3 of that bill on accountability and administrative measures regarding current practices of the department and a different adds additional enforcement mechanisms regarding accreditation. And that is kind of spelled out more in there. A lot of it is, my understanding is a process similar to what is being done now. It just adds additional enforcement mechanisms within that part of the bill. Then there's also House File 228. I'll jump down to diversity bill eliminates a voluntary diversity plan as a reason to deny open enrollment, which is also a bill that I know we talked about earlier when the state board met. So that one is very clean bill. House File 847, Education Practices. It requires the State Board of Ed to establish the flexible student and school support program. It allows for additional category source to be eligible to be used within the school district and the flexibility account. And also within that bill provides opportunity for additional appeal process for the state board for late enrollment applications within that bill. So those are two that as a state board, I thought you would be interested in. Those two provisions of that was House File 847.
It's so abstract to me. What does that mean?
Which part?
The 847, what is it? What's its intent? I
Educational Practices Bill.
I'm trying to grasp it.
So it creates flexible student and support programs, so it allows districts to try new things.
Okay, it's just open, just,
Yeah, and it creates, there's some other things that are more directly to the consumer or directly to the parent, like tuition tax credits, it bumps that up. But it also makes some significant changes to open enrollment, which we'll discuss in the rulemaking process, such as creating an additional appeal process for a district, a parent who feels that the district has sort of persistently failed to repeated requests for improved instruction.
okay, thank you.
So it's a big bill. It was part of Governor Reynolds's initial priorities. But those are the two touch points that have most direct relevance to state board policymaking.
Okay, thank you.
Can I go back, I'm sorry, to the charter school bill? We have two, what I'll call traditional charter schools, and we accredit them. Did I understand that that process may be changed? I mean, you're working on changing that process that we've used in the past. That's
So-
what this bill means.
Yeah, what it means is either pathway still has to be approved by the state board. There's a path that's tied to a public school and there's a path that could be separated from the public school. They both have to go through the same application process that would come to you guys.
But are we changing the process we used for the school board creating a charter school? Is any of that going to change?
So the two existing charters are sort of in their safe harbor. They will continue to operate
Okay,
under
okay.
that old law. But if I'm a new school board, state board model charter,
Okay.
there's some slightly different requirements.
We'll get to
Thank
see
you.
all the charter schools that come through then.
Yes.
Oh, great. Excuse me. All right,
The-
that's
but
Do we
great.
accredit them? Or, I mean, we give them approval
You're the
one
single
time.
author.
Do we accredit them on a,
Credit and
Yeah.
monitor.
Yeah.
So the
and monitor?
Like we do with.
similar to now, under the two that currently exist, there's that 3-year cycle.
Yeah, yeah. So that is still in there. I mean, that still exists. Okay.
And is that the bill that changed open enrollment?
Yes.
Okay. And what do those changes allow? I get a lot of questions about that.
So Senate File 847 changed over.
Oh,
And 813 is the charter school. bill.
okay.
So some of the questions, so as Thomas was saying, like the provisions of if it's a persistent failure of the school district, like the good cause exemptions, we have to put some guidance out on that to clarify it, but it creates additional scenarios, at least for eligibility or allowing them to open and roll out, in addition to eliminating schools with diversity plans that did not allow them to open roll out. Yes. So yes, in two different ways.
Yes.
And a lot of this bill is pandemic responsive. So one of the open enrollment out allowances with immediate athletic eligibility is if I'm an athlete at a school that discontinues a sport. My school decides we're not going to play my sport anymore. We're not going to swim. That offers swimming can be immediately eligible.
But it doesn't allow, so let's say you're in a district with 2 high schools, let's just say Ankeny. It doesn't allow you to then move to the other school district and then open and roll back to where you were,
So if I'm
different cause.
between districts with multi-buildings at the same grade level, that intra-district assignment is not a part of open enrollment. So Ankeny Centennial, that is entirely governed by Ankeny School Board.
Right.
But Ankeny to Roosevelt would be covered, Ankeny Centennial to Southeast Polk would be governed by
That,
House File 847.
yes, okay.
There'll be guidance on that.
So Ankeny has one school,
With examples.
or do they have two school boards? One
Ankeny
for
is
Centennial and
one school.
one, because they have two high
Both high
schools.
schools, yeah. So
Sure, makes sense. Gotcha.
So I'm going to highlight some rules that you will see. Some of these you've already seen. Because the content area folks have been really good about getting me rules ideas once they see bills coming through. I'm gonna hit on some of the rules that you, there will be rulemaking required because of education approach, House File 868, because of the change in the accountability structure and how districts are accredited or maybe put in timeout or maybe in permanent timeout. A lot of what is currently in law is including but not limited to. The new bill, the new law expands, fleshes out that including but not limited to. Makes clear options that were already on the department and the state boards in the box of tools. But so since those are now explicit, they will need to be codified when the department and the state board rewrite chapter 12, which is our accreditation standards. So that is one bill that Renee discussed that will require state board action as far as rules revisions. The open enrollment education practices. That will also require rulemaking on two levels. The first is the flexibility and flexibility accounts. There will be some rules that will be needed in the finance rules. And there will be some rules that will be needed in the chapter 12 general accreditation standards. You will see some open enrollment proposed rules tomorrow that try to capture those changes and put those out for notice of intended action. That expand the ability to open enroll out, but also eliminate the 5 districts and that use voluntary diversity funds. A couple of other bills that have been signed that will require rulemaking. Renee has already discussed House File 813, the charter school bills. There is currently a chapter on charter schools that governs 2 schools. That content will need to be elaborated for any new charters that this board approves or this board considers going forward. There will be some rules that you will see tomorrow regarding homeschooling. Homeschooling assessment. And there will be rules that you will see tomorrow also in the open enrollment context regarding Medicaid billing. So when we discuss those rules tomorrow or in August, we'll refer back to this discussion. We'll refer back to the legislative updates that Renee has been sending throughout the year. But I just wanted to, there's plenty of opportunity for rulemaking and making policy, or if not making policy, at least interrogating policy through the rulemaking process, some of which we'll see tomorrow. So questions for either Renee or me. I'm more than happy to answer any rulemaking questions and be more than happy to answer any process questions, legislative process
When we
questions.
look at the rulemaking and when it's applied to us in the documentation, usually it's highlighted what's the change, right? It's underscored.
Right.
And then striked out means that it's old.
from current rule to proposed rule, or current rule to adopted rule, that is the case. But when there's a change between proposed adopted or proposed no, there's a couple rules that you will see tomorrow where there are no underscores because there's changes between the notice of intended action and the proposed final action, but those are explained in the cover page. This change was made because. But when there are underscores and strike throughs, that is either a proposed or final change from the status quo.
Just making sure I understood how it,
And there's a couple of rulemakings tomorrow where there were changes between the notice that you gave for public comment. And we'll point those out.
thank you.
Thomas, going back to charter schools, does the state board approve a charter school to begin operation, or is that with the Department of Ed?
It's the state board. It's the state board.
Okay. Current thoughts as far as accreditation, although it was brought up, but charter schools can be a wide range potentially of be atypical school type of thing. So what are the current thoughts as far as writing up accreditation standards? Will they be a lot different, a little different, or who knows at this point?
I think there are certain things that will stay the same. There are certain non-negotiables. Be part of the accountability framework. Following state and federal civil rights law, but what that accountability framework is still, that's a work in progress.
Yeah.
In very early progress too. But
I do know that's, I think some private schools have the option of going with a different accreditation agency for accreditation.
the charters, it's just the state board.
Yeah, but it's what the state will accept, I guess.
Right.
Oh, we'll just stay tuned. for-
Well,
How does the funding follow the charter schools in the legislation?
it follows the child.
Does it? Okay.
A portion of it. There are
Sorry.
certain funds that are, like voter approved or.
Doesn't all
things,
follow the child.
But the funds relative to instruction.
District.
Yes, the district cost per pupil, some of the supplements, special education weighted funding, English learner weighted funding. But funds that are dedicated to instruction follow. Funds
Does
that are dedicated to infrastructure stay.
Yeah.
And that's just, I might not be exactly right, but that's close enough, like horseshoes and nuclear war. It's close enough.
and did they set it up to allow for private dollars?
Renee and I invite questions throughout. This is an ongoing iterative process. At any time, if you think of something that you wished you'd have asked, my favorite questions that are the questions that I thought of driving home from the courthouse. If you think of those questions, we are at your disposal. Anything else for the good of the order? We got some heavy work to come to do.
Yes.
Have you had a lot of questions? I mean, have you had a lot since this passed? The other charter school?
Some,
Oh,
because there's been a couple that I think have been active along the way. So the follow-up is we have to get some more information put together, but the high level criteria is all outlined in the language, but the process, we have to finalize.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Levels in the details. right?
Yes, yeah, it is. Yes.
I'm assuming that there may be some nationally charter school organization, at least.
I would say the one notable difference between the way the legislation was crafted in Iowa and many other states is that there's a single authorizer here versus other states could have multiple authorizers.
They can't.
You are the only authorizer of a charter school. Other states could have 30 authorizers. And
Previous-
so if you look at the scope of oversight, it's much different.
Previous legislative attempts were to have.
Multiple authorizers.
Authorizers,
Yeah.
and that's why it never really moved.
And the different team goes out and audit the charter schools.
I think that's to be determined yet. I, without having it in front of me, I don't know the specifics on the accountability pieces yet, so we work through it. So I we'll let you know.
So don't assume it's gonna be like public school, how we do it today.
I would,
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is dependent on the charter itself.
yeah, like they have,
What's the goal and the purpose of the charter that either the school board or the private sponsor proposed? And I think that the charter itself is going to drive a lot of the accountability. So, holding people accountable to their words and their,
yeah,
make
that's what.
sure that the say-do ratio matches. I think that starts, again, starts the charter itself. And that becomes the sort of a micro accountability.
The local school district doesn't have anything to, how,
Well,
you know,
it could,
It could.
but it wouldn't
It's
have
a
to.
sponsor. It could if the local district was the sponsor of the charter, as the two existing charters.
Previously, it only could. It had to be tied to the local district.
So will a charter school have to use licensed employees? So
Yes.
That's not always the case.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
Any other question? Brian? No? Okay. All right.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
When's the next
This is for,
legislation?
Second Monday of January.
I was like, oh, we should try to occur for Dave Tilley. For Dave Tilley.
Never stop.
This is coming in.
Yeah, Definitely we should.
I was like, oh crap, I forgot to
I thought you were
go
gonna.
get my gift certificate before I got this out.
It's already yes.
I forgot to, yeah. I feel like,
Never at recess.
We did do it.
no, I didn't even know you were retired. And I talked to him in January. He was like, I'm retired. I was like, what?
Do you want me to kind of kick this part off since I think probably we're going to talk about this part? So for state board priorities and goals, what we have done is we have our team here to help lead you through this process. So as we mentioned earlier, a lot of this, we're trying to go beyond just the wordsmithing of language. We're trying to create actionable items for this. And in order to do that, it's important to have an understanding of what currently is measured and how we have measurable outcomes for these goals. So I guess I should confirm, are you presenting that first or are you going into the small groups first?
Whatever works best, really. In light of some of the conversations we've had today, what we've done is start to pull together sources of data for your existing priorities and goals. So we can certainly share so you have that information at your disposal. But also if you're more focused right now on revisiting whether or not that's the way you want your priorities and goals, then you want to hear how things match up.
Let's do that first, since we originally sort of planned on, we're going to have staff give you an update on how goals can currently be measured. And then the question to ask yourselves is that, does that match what you expect? I think we have some idea that we might be changing our goals, but I think just to understand what currently aligns with what we have. The question I always hear is, well, we have this goal, but what's our status on it? We don't really give those updates, or what's our action step, or what's our responsibility as a board member? So to start first with, there's lots of things the department can measure. Maybe the things we're currently measuring aren't what you want. Maybe it doesn't meet their goal. Maybe it does, but that helps set up the conversation for them when we break you up into smaller groups with staff to help support you, really kind of work through this a little bit more detailed. I think today's been a great way to kind of set up, we need to rethink some things. So we want to make you the most prepared and supported that we can to help you work through that process. So however you guys want to come up and share, that would be great.
Now we could either project on Zoom or we've got a spreadsheet put together with some of that information.
Oh.
Like you have a paper for them?
In about 5 minutes.
Do you want a paper?
Yes. I,
Yes.
Five.
my age, yes.
Yes, I want paper.
I think paper pie.
I think just to, you can write on it, you
Yeah.
can touch it, you can just,
Yeah.
A whole nother level of engagement.
actually having the book. I think.
Okay.
So, do you have whiteout? I made a couple mistakes. Yeah. So I'm not the best. Yeah, okay, thank you. I wanted to white out my little squigglies.
And before I forget,
What we doing?
Yeah, I bet.
Can we get a piece?
should we pause the meeting? for
I'm not
a second?
sure. Is this it right here?
Every day
We're
when I.
gonna take another 5 minutes while we prep for this next.
Video game.